This is Marco Reus, and you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 304 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we talk about the debacle that was the Friday night game against Paderborn. Watzke's setting an ultimatum for Lucien Favre, maybe, who knows. We'll discuss that, and we will preview the upcoming Champions League clash away to Barcelona at the Camp Nou. And for all that and more, joins me once again Marthis. Hello Marthis, it's good to have you back.
Hello, Stefan. It's good to be back. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, because yesterday my wife and I went to the Christmas market in Philadelphia, and believe it or not, there's an actual bratwurst stand.
I know.
Where you can get actual bratwurst and not some pathetic excuse for bratwurst that you otherwise get in these coordinates. So I'm very happy and upbeat right now. But that is about to fade, because we will talk about Borussia Dortmund now. But Marthis, before I introduce the next panelist, that prediction you made, I think it was 5-1.
I got the amount of goals right. Okay, that's all that matters. I got the amount of goals right. So shut up. Leave me alone.
All right, it's not that I did much better. So, here to scold us now is Lars Pollmann. Hello, Lars. How are you doing? It's good to have you back.
I mean, it wasn't my fault that I've not been on the show for quite some time now, Stefan. If we like to think back to the episode 300 that never was. So I think I actually was on the last time for the Barca preview of the first match, if that's to be believed. So yes, it's good to be back.
Well, my memory doesn't work in such ways that I could remember, but either way, I'm glad you're back, so we can now discuss all the goodies in front of us, which is a lot. But before we do that, I am very happy to announce that this episode is sponsored and brought to you by Pontus, who has contributed on our Patreon page, and he wants a shout out to Schwedische Borussen. So all the Borussen in Sweden, please be greeted. I don't know if that's a fan club or not, but if it is, please find their Facebook page. And then we have Sean Marthis, who is a Borussia Dortmund fan from California, I believe, and he is telling me that he is moving to North Hollywood very soon and is looking for fellow BVB fans. So any Dortmund fans out there in Northern Hollywood or that area, please reach out to Sean Marthis. As always, contacts will be in the show notes. So that is all the positivity I have, because now we have to move on to that 3-3 draw against Paderborn on Friday night. A game where I thought it should at least be a sort of easy win. You know, on paper, it's probably the easiest Bundesliga game of the season, if you will. But that turned out to be a false observation, prediction, whatever. Lars, I know you didn't watch it live, so that means you had all the emotions yanked out of that game for yourself. So please tell me what went wrong in this first half and overall in 90 minutes, and please go as long as you must.
That's what she said. I mean, all the emotions, because I'm the emotional watcher of these games, obviously. To be honest, I thought, knowing about the result and reading up on, other people's opinions, I thought it was going to be worse, actually, when I watched the game on Sunday afternoon. I actually don't think it was too, terrible in most instances outside of the 3 goals, obviously. I mean, you can't concede 3 goals against the bottom side in the Bundesliga, but those were kind of singular instances, I would say. I don't think that Paderborn were, bossing the game or putting it to Dortmund over the course of the 45 minutes. It was more, an instance of a perfect storm for Paderborn, perhaps, with, Favre going without Akanji for the first time in eons, and then not going with an actual centre-back, but Julian Weigl, who lost every sprinting duel there was to be lost. The same goes for, which is far less, or far more surprising for Nico Schulz for the first goal, because, running is the one thing that even a player in absolutely bad form should still be able to do if he's fast. And, Nico Schulz is pretty fast. There's no reason for him to lose that sprinting duel with, I think, Kai Pröger, on Dortmund's left side for the first goal. So I think, honestly, outside of conceding the 3 goals, I don't think it was a horrific performance necessarily. I mean, it certainly wasn't good, and certainly the amount of mistakes they've made over the last few weeks, you would hope that against Paderborn, who from an individual talent standpoint are probably the worst team in the Bundesliga, as you kind of alluded to, you would hope that you don't make those mistakes against this level of opposition. But, it happened. So, it certainly seems like, that there were some fundamental issues, but, those were kind of used in the perfect way for Paderborn, who, and I will say this much about them. I think even though obviously they are talent deficient in terms of the opposition in the Bundesliga Dortmund are going to face, I think from a tactical plan standpoint and from the idea that team tries to follow on the pitch, I didn't feel going into this game that this was going to be, a perfect opponent for Dortmund to get that easy win that kind of maybe propels things, for the stretch run of the Hinrunde. I think, given their attacking talent, even if it's not great players, they are still, very good in counterattacking, and it's a brave team following a brave approach, probably because they all know they're going to get relegated at the end of the season. So, they want to have fun for 34 match days instead of, just dreading what's very likely to happen at the end of the season. So I didn't feel going into this game that this was like a great opponent for Dortmund to get their mojo back, if that makes sense. So, I mean, obviously I was still surprised reading, during the first half, it's 1-0 for Paderborn, 2-0 for Paderborn, 3-0 for Paderborn, but I certainly didn't go into it with the expectation that, Matthias had of an easy as you like win.
Well, Matthias, defend yourself.
Well, I mean, we've seen, Dortmund, even over the last 2 seasons, take opponents apart that had a more naive attacking approach against them. It's happened a few times. I was hoping it would happen now. I mean, even thinking back to the performances Paderborn had against the likes of Schalke and Hoffenheim. What I didn't foresee was what Lars already mentioned, the fact that of all of the pairings at central defense, the one that didn't even cross my mind was Hummels and Weigl, to be honest. It didn't even enter the stratosphere of my brain, because why would you put your slowest center back pairing against a side that is purely built upon trying to use speed? It's kind of like anybody who tried that against Darmstadt back in the day, a few years ago, they would get burned that way. And that first goal with Nico Schulz, the problem you have there isn't necessarily that Kai Pröger is faster than Nico Schulz, but Nico Schulz is just not a good defender. the way he approached Kai Brugger was so naive and so reckless that once he got to him, he actually was a couple of steps past Brugger when Brugger got the ball. So his positioning was so bad, and his body was positioned up the field, not sideways or back towards his own goal, that he had no chance. And that's why Brugger was essentially, by the end of it, roughly 2 meters, 1.5 meters past him, just because Nico Schulz's defensive positioning was so horrendously bad when he approached him that he just got turned. And in a way that you cannot let yourself get turned in a moment like that. And then the other ones, like Lars said, Weigl is just really, really slow. So it was just, I didn't expect that. When I saw it was Weigl and Hummels, I remember looking at it and go, well, that's different. Didn't see that one coming. And then the first long ball, that wasn't even a goal. I went, oh crap. This could be a huge problem. And sure enough, it turned out to be a disastrous problem in the first half, and Dortmund had all the work to do. I mean, yeah, looking back at it, and I did subject myself to watching it a second time, just to take my own anger out of it, like you mentioned. I agree with Lars, it wasn't all that bad. It wasn't good, and the big problem Dortmund had, again, was they'd pass it, they'd go out wide, and then they didn't go anywhere with it. Like, they would just stand around. I remember one scene in particular where Guerrero just stood there and he was pointing to his teammates like, do something, go somewhere, move somewhere, so we have outlets to pass to, and it just didn't exist. And in the second half, obviously that was completely different. It was like the first half didn't happen. And so I forget who it was. I think it was Stefan Ursfeld, maybe on Twitter. He said, I wasn't angry in the first half, but now that I see what they're capable of in the second half, now I'm pissed off. And I think that kind of, that made, at least me, it angered me as well, where it's like, where the hell was that in the first half? So that for me is one of the big question marks coming out of this match.
Yeah, I guess so. If you want to talk about the motivational issues this team apparently has, because there was definitely quite the significant difference in the third half. Lars, do you have a more in-depth explanation for why Dortmund were without a shot on target in the first half? And I can't really recollect a big chance. I think they had a couple of shots that went wide, but nothing where I would jump out of the seat and say, oh well, this will have an expected goal value of 2 point something or so. Do you have an explanation for that and why that changed in the second half? And do you think it's just about the substitutions that Favre made? And also, while you at it, I know it's going to be a long list, but in the pre-pod, you were already, not very satisfied with Moderhut, so please expand on that too.
Well, I think, first of all, I think we have to give props to Paderborn's defensive effort in the first half. I think they did excellent. They built those two 4-man lines, which, is a pretty brave approach against a team on paper as dangerous as Dortmund are. I mean, we've seen so many, let's face it, kind of bad teams come into Dortmund and sit back with 5 or 6 defenders, and Paderborn didn't really do that. So they had brilliant distance control between the lines. They didn't allow Reus and even Alcázar, when he dropped deeper, to have any material impact on the game. So, as Matthias said, it was kind of, for the most part, most of the same. One of the central midfielders, most of the time Witzel, but at times Dahoud dropping a bit deeper. And then the ball going out wide, typically to Guerrero, who I think was the only one in the first half who at least tried to do something, even though most of it didn't come, or probably nothing came off it. So the ball was outside. The center was covered pretty well, and I mean, we don't have to talk about Dortmund's lack of a target player for speculative crosses from the halfway point of the opponent's half. So there was just not many. There weren't many openings for Dortmund to do anything with, and obviously that's also down to slow progression of the ball, which has been a problem for the better part of 2019, and not only this season. The positional play, too little movement, not a lot of things, going forward for Dortmund happening at high speed outside of counterattacks, which, Paderborn didn't give them too many of. So, I would say that Paderborn defended very well, and Dortmund just, didn't do the things you need to do to, counter that, so to speak. As for Dahoud, I mean, I like many others, I thought he deserves more chances than he's gotten this season. I think, for example, against Bremen, he did pretty well, but was subbed off after like 60 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So you would think it makes sense to play him in a game against a side like Paderborn, where you can expect to have 2/3 of possession or even more, and I think they did have, without checking the actual numbers. But with Paderborn defending well in their pretty solid structure, I think Dahoud just didn't have it in him to make things happen between the lines, to maybe perform an overload, to help out on the sides, to come close as a pass receiver. So the only thing that worked even halfway decently with him was when he, instead of Witzel, dropped deep to receive balls. So that's on the ball, and I mean, the entire team pretty much didn't play well on the ball, so I'm not going to knock him too much. But when you see his lack of defensive effort in some of these situations, I think before the first goal, he's the one completely out of position in the first place, and then getting into the duel, but trying to, I don't know what he tried to do. It was basically a bodiless attempt to win the ball of whichever Paderborn player played the pass to Pröger. I mean, knowing a thing or two about Paderborn, which I'm sure Favre prepared them for their prowess in counterattacks and whatnot. I mean, even if it's after 5 minutes, if you don't get into the duel correctly, just take the foul, and even if it's a yellow, I mean, that's worth not going behind against Paderborn, which is exactly what happened. So I think, as always with Dahoud, it seems like there's a larger issue, and this not being an isolated incident, but rather, a sign of perhaps a bit of, a lacking game intelligence, if that makes sense. I mean, if you look at him purely from a talent standpoint, there's no reason he's not a regular starter for Dortmund and indeed Germany at this point, because he has it all, but he just does not put it together over any kind of consistent basis, for even back at Gladbach and now certainly at Dortmund. So he's kind of the ultimate tease, I would say, in the Dortmund squad, the kind of player they absolutely need. The belated Ilkay Gündoğan replacement, if you like, but, just not giving it on a consistent basis, giving back the sparse opportunities he's getting.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there with Dahoud. I think that's a very comprehensive analysis of his, I guess, extended period now since he joined Dortmund. To me, that describes it really well. Overall, I once again was pretty annoyed, especially in the first half with the pressing. I think Sebastian Wessling tweeted about it too, that you see the first 3 players leading the line attack, and then you have a gaping hole or whatever. It's something that you've read and seen so many games now. And to me, it's just very annoying. I couldn't independently confirm whether Marco Reus actually said that after the game that we don't know how to press. I don't know if you could that. I think he said that to DAZN. But it was just one quote out of a longer interview, but it went semi-viral on Twitter. Because it's quite significant if Marco Reus says it, and if he said it, and sort of very revealing, because Marco Reus obviously has been part of teams that knew how to press, and even if he didn't say it, I still have to agree, because this Dortmund side right now does not look like a team that knows how to press, that knows what triggers their pressing, where to set pressing traps, and collectively move around. And then, of course, you always have that problem. Even if they knew how to press, they have this slow ass central defensive partnership with Hummels and Weigl, that even if you press well and press high, then you might push beyond the halfway line, and then Mamba or whoever, Pröger or Holtmann, just have to wait and for one long ball, and it's very easy then to score in Dortmund. So overall, the setup from Dortmund just wasn't really good at what they were trying to do, to be honest. So the addition of Weigl next to Hummels against a team that pretty much only has a counterattack as their weapon was a bit of a head scratcher. I'm not going to lie. Matthias, is this something that Favre can fix? That Dortmund press as they do, which to me is not up to the standard where I would want it to be.
So there are a few things there. I saw, first of all, I agree 100% with Lars and when it comes to Dahoud, and I'm personally done with him. I just as soon never see him in a match day squad again. I've moved on. I have moved on and will not give him the benefit of the doubt anymore. So, as far as what Marco Reus said in terms of not knowing how to press, obviously, like you said, that went viral, and on Twitter, people were like, Favre, he doesn't know how to teach these guys how to press. They know how to frickin' press, okay? They've done it before. In fact, they did it in the second half. I think what Marco Reus was more trying to say is that they were just... It's not that they weren't prepared, not that they haven't been taught how to do it, when to do it, and so on. It's just, I don't know if there's a mental block with too many of these players where they just won't. They just decide not to, or they don't know how exactly when it comes to that situation. And as we all know, you can't just have one player press, because if one player presses, everything opens up and you're going to get carved open. So the whole team has to press. So even if Marco Reus and Paco know what they want to do in a press, if the 5-6 other people around them aren't doing it effectively, then them doing it is even more of a disaster. So it's hard from the outside looking in, because I'm not at the training sessions. I don't know what they work on. I don't know what they're saying behind closed doors tactically. But in the second half, they pressed the hell out of them. And they were able to do the things that we were kind of expecting. That's what you expect from Dortmund, to be that dominant and overwhelming and suffocating. I mean, they suffocated Paderborn in the second half. Also partly because Paderborn were completely tired if you get down to the last 15, 20 minutes. But they suffocated them. And that's the thing I don't understand. Where's that disconnect first half to second half that we've seen, that pattern that we've seen play out a few too many times this season? Is that a decision made by Favre where he's like, we want to conserve energy because we know long term through the course of 90 minutes, the other team will tire themselves out. Look at Gladbach. And then we can spring into action and suffocate them and play full energy and get players on there with full energy and do something. That's an approach you can take. It can work, and it did a few times, but it can also miraculously misfire if on top of that, like you said, you decide to put Hummels and Weigl as your center back partnership against a team that's built for speed and counterattack. So I think the blame can be equally shifted between players who just wouldn't move and seem to have some kind of mentality block as far as just turn up and win. And then coaching and tactically, that as far as we can only assume, that this is part of the game plan. I don't know how else to explain it, even though Favre has a few times said, hey, this isn't what I told them to do. I basically wanted the higher energy. And I remember even Peter Stöger said similar things. Well, this isn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to press more. Bosch even said that a few times. I remember Tuchel saying it once or twice. So the question you have is it now a tactical issue with the coach, or is it the players are making the decisions themselves whether or not they do or don't? I don't know. I mean, maybe one of you has the better, deeper insight into that, or if we're all just guessing.
I do not. So Lars, if you have anything to say, please go ahead.
I mean, it seems a bit far-fetched when you look at, the personnel turnover over the last few years. I mean, which of these outfield players actually played under Tuchel? I mean, Reus did.
So we can blame it all on Reus.
I mean, to be fair, I think Marco Reus has probably been the biggest single disappointment in Dortmund's campaign, from a player perspective. So he deserves definitely some level of blame that he's not getting at the moment, because right now, and for a few weeks actually, Marco Reus, his best position has been on the microphone and not on the pitch. So that's not great, even if, his second half was pretty good and he got the all-important question mark 3-3 equalizer against Paderborn. I think he's certainly not played to the standards that obviously he has set for himself, but also of the standards you expect from Dortmund's captain, Germany's footballer of the year, and generally considered to be one of the 2 or 3 best attacking players in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, I think I would actually agree with that sentiment, even though that does not really explain Matthias' question. I do think that Marco Reus also needs to work on his body language and his own pressing energy, whatever you want to call it. I think that... And I don't have any evidence to show whether my observation is correct or not, but I feel like he sometimes only starts to quote unquote work on the football field when the result says it. So basically when it's still scoreless or so, he sometimes looks a bit lackadaisical and only really starts going when Dortmund fall behind or whatever. Sometimes I wish there would be more just more of an initiative from himself. I don't know if I'm right with that or if that's just my own perception. No idea, but that's what I think. So it's a bit annoying, to be honest. But what also helped, obviously, what I think was a new club record. I've read it somewhere, but I haven't confirmed it. That Dortmund trailed for the first time at home in the Bundesliga by 3 goals. Is that correct? I don't know. But
no,
at least
it was the second fastest they've trailed 3 goals at home.
Okay, so that was 43 minutes.
After a Leverkusen game some decades ago, which actually also ended in 3-3.
Huh. Well, so you're saying Dortmund should always hurry up to concede 3 goals so they don't lose. That is obviously a brilliant game plan. So, Matthias, what did change then with the second half? What did, I think it was Hakimi, Brandt, and then Hazard all coming on in the space of 5 minutes. I think Hakimi and Brandt came on right away, and then later Hazard for, was it Alcázar? I'm not entirely sure what the sequence was of substitutions.
The one sub was before the half. Because Alcázar's injury, and then Hazard and Hakimi coming in at the half, and it was like a completely different Dortmund side showed up in the second half. Yes, I know we had 3 substitutions, but from even the ones that were on the pitch before, the energy levels were higher. There was pressing, there was intensity, there was speed, there was directness, there was intent in movement and pass. That's the thing that I don't understand, how that didn't happen in the first half of not just this match. We can go back and look at a few other ones. And then all of a sudden it does work. And at that point, and Dortmund could have gotten a second goal like a minute and a half after the first goal. And at that point, Paderborn weren't completely spent yet. They still had enough in the tank for Mamba to have a huge opportunity at a fourth goal. Where I don't get it. I mean, I don't know if you can give me more insight there. That's what I just don't understand. I mean, those players come in, they are high energy, they have a lot to prove, they want to be in the starting 11, and I think you can make an argument at this point that maybe they should be. That maybe you have to shift things around and no longer worry about Nico Schulz and just put Hakimi at the left back position. And keep Piszczek at the right back position, who was okay. Not too many players covered themselves with glory, in the first half, but he wasn't an issue, in my opinion. So it's just, that's the thing that's so frustrating with this match in particular, because it was night and day, the difference between the two Dortmunds first half and second half.
Yeah, so the good news about Alcázar is that he only got a knock on his knee, which was probably painful and he couldn't continue, but he won't miss for any extended periods, as far as I know. So I guess that's the one positive here, except from the point, obviously, that Dortmund grabbed in the end. Lars, did you have the feeling that Dortmund could have won this over the 45 minutes in the second half, or do you think that they didn't do enough? Because if I look at the expected goal scheme, then I think Paderborn still came out victorious there.
I mean, I don't know how I would have felt watching it live. Obviously, knowing the result going in when I watched it, I also knew when the goals were going to come. So I don't think I can give an honest assessment on how I viewed it, but I certainly didn't feel like there was, a bettering of great scoring chances on Dortmund's side. And actually, as Matthias alluded to, the Mamba chance to make it 4-1, that was probably bigger than any chance Dortmund missed outside of their 3 goals. So I think, they certainly, from the way I watched the game and what I knew about it beforehand, it felt more like Paderborn were possibly a bit hard done by the result, as opposed to Dortmund being unlucky to only get 1 point. I mean, obviously also with, the game flow. I mean, they equalized in, what was it, the 93rd minute or so. I mean, it's hard to say that Dortmund should have won a game. They only equalize, a minute from the end of stoppage time.
Yeah, I guess you were the wrong person to ask, because I definitely had the feeling, 50 minutes, 60 minutes into the game that Dortmund had a very decent chance to win this, but obviously, there was then a lot of time where they did not create any chances, as you would imagine, just also because Paderborn played very well. Now, one aspect that I kind of appreciated were how the fans reacted, because on the one hand, there was a lot of discontent aired, especially while Paderborn celebrated their goals. I think the Paderborn fans were drowned out by the boos and the whistles, and obviously, the players had already, with the halftime whistle, they heard a lot, but in the second half, Dortmund fans supported their team until the last minute, and straight with the final whistle, you heard the boos and whistles again and the discontent. But I think that was very smart by the Dortmund fans, because it doesn't really make sense to boo your team during the game, but then you can still send a message afterwards. So I, for myself, thought that was well handled overall by the crowd in the stadium. Matthias, I know you are a big proponent for booing when you've paid a lot of money for a ticket. So how did you see that?
I don't know if I've ever felt that just because you spent money on something, you're allowed to abuse people. It doesn't give you a right.
I know you said that on the Yellowwallpod. It's somewhere on record.
No, it's
within
me.
These
That's
300.
me. It's me, Stefan.
No, Matthias has said it too. That was before you even joined.
It's always my point that if you pay for a ticket, and as long as you don't abuse, but just boo and jeer and whistle, I think that's perfectly within your right as a paying customer at that point. But actually, I also when we watched it real life, I thought they are going to let him have it in the second half, and obviously, as you said, the opposite was the case. I think. Just as you just said, I mean, the support by the fans throughout the 94 minutes was great, and then I also think they were perfectly within their rights to let him have it after the final whistle. So I would agree with your notion that this was like a very, very smart reaction by the fans.
Well, Matthias, if you wanted to say something, then go ahead.
No, I totally 100% agree with you. I feel that the way it was handled this time was really good. I remember, was it the season before last when they unfurled the banner, you're not a Dortmunder, basically. I don't remember exactly the verbiage, but it was like this banner before the match saying, we're all Dortmunder, Borussen, you're not. That stuff pisses me off because it's just a flat out fact in sports psychology that when a team is at home and they're being jeered by their own fans, their internal pressure gets to the point where they don't play as well. They don't go, oh, now I'm up for it. It happens that way if Dortmund is playing in Schalke and the Schalke fans are booing the Dortmund players. That's motivational as if you're a player from an outside team, a traveling team. But if it's your own fans, it creates inhibitions because the nervousness goes higher and higher and higher. So the way the support went was not just valid and rightful in the way that they did it and justifiable, but it actually proved a point and was helpful because, the booing at the halftime whistle, that sent the right message saying, this is bullcrap what you guys just did. Get it together. And Dortmund did, and the support was high, it was loud, it was boisterous, it was energetic, every goal was celebrated, it was positive, and then the moment the game ended, like you said, they got an earful, as they should, where they said, okay, it was great that you came back, but this was bullshit. This is not acceptable to us. And so I feel like it was handled perfectly by the Dortmund fans in the right moments, acting the right way, because all too often when you just get it does. I mean, I know we all have seen like Germany play and get booed by their own fans because they're not winning 10-0 or anything like that. And that's just, not only is that not helpful, it actually makes it worse for the players, and they'll perform at a lower level because of that.
Yeah, what I really liked was someone tweeted after the game that both lost 3-3, which really summed it up because Paderborn, heartbreaking for them to lose their lead in the, 91st minute of stoppage time, or in the first minute of stoppage time. Game didn't go this long, luckily. So obviously, this game and this result and this performance, stoked the rumors that Lucien Favre's future at Borussia Dortmund might be short-lived, that he is in the hot seat now. And obviously on Sunday we had the members assembly, and I guess then the next day there was the general assembly for the stock owners or whatever. But at the members assembly, Watzke spoke about several points, and first of all, he was talking about the quote-unquote elephant round with Sebastian Kehl, Michael Zorc, Matthias Sammer, and I think Dr. Reinhard Raubal was invited as well, just to be witness of their highly self-critical analysis or whatever. But after a lot of contemplating and deliberating, Watzke revealed that they have made one big mistake in the summer, and that was not to add a second number 9. And he said, we are also fully aware that there are arguments against the second striker. Bayern Munich also only have one. there's always the risk that both neutralize each other. But the bottom line is we made the wrong assessment, is what he said. If you want to read the full speech, or not the full speech, but 30 minutes of it, I transcribed that on yellowwall.net. It's not behind the paywall, so you can access it. And then obviously, he sort of implicitly gave Lucien Favre an ultimatum. And Lars, I want your reaction whether that's a valid interpretation or not. But he is basically talking about that many players right now are not in a good form, and that last season's difference makers don't present themselves in their best form right now. And he said, and also it's obvious that the team on the field does not leave the impression of a coherent formation or a stable formation. It's on the team and on Lucien Favre and his staff to improve that situation. It's also our right to demand that. Lucien, you still have our trust, but one thing is also clear. You have been in this football business for a long time, like many of us. At the end of the day, football is defined by results. We wish you, your team, and the players all the best to conjure up a turnaround. You have all the support that we can give you. And then basically he continues, saying that we have to show in the next 2 difficult games at the Camp Nou and at the Olympiastadion that they have a change in attitude and whatnot. So yada yada. So do you think that it's fair from me to basically infer that Lucien Favre is thin at the top? The air is a little getting thinner.
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly any other way to read the words of Watzkes here. I mean, if they didn't play in the Champions League, 3 days after or 4 days after the Paderborn game, it wouldn't have been a shock if Favre had been sacked straight away, or, the other day, obviously. But they don't really have a viable alternative to take over for just, 1 or 2 games. They don't have like a Hansi Flick at Bayern situation going on at Dortmund, which, we've kind of talked about the brain drain with, David Wagner, Daniel Farke, Hannes Wolf, even someone like Daniel Sievert, all leaving within a relatively short amount of time. So I think it's fairly fair to say that they are concurrently working towards the Barca and Hertha games and having, behind the scenes, maybe not necessarily talks, but, they will make contact or will have made contact already with, a couple of coaches they deem of potential interest in case, they don't, win both games or play really well against Barca again. And I mean, I would kind of say almost that the Hertha game is more important in this equation than the Barca game. I think they are playing at Barcelona, who currently have Messi, Suarez, Griezmann, and most of their attacking talent available to them. They have some defensive issues in terms of personnel, but I mean, whenever you go to the house that Lionel Messi hasn't built, but, refurbished over the last 20 or 15 years or whatever, I don't think you can reasonably expect to, come away with a great result necessarily. So a good performance against Barca is probably more important than, just eking out a win somehow. And then I think the big one is at Hertha, a place Dortmund have struggled tremendously in over the last few years. Even last season, I think you and Konstantin, Stefan, didn't you pick it as your match of the season even in the award show? The late winner of Marco Reus from a Jadon Sancho assist, I think. If they were to lose at Hertha, who may well have fired their own coach, and by that point already, then it's goodbye Lucien, and actually it might still be that this is going to be his final game, unless, of course, you can't fire him after a 5-0 away win in Berlin, but I don't have the imaginative powers to think of Dortmund beating anyone 5-0 at this stage.
Yeah, neither do I, but this Dortmund team has surprised me in many sort of ways, so why not in the positive way for once? Matthias, do you agree with that assessment? And if so, what do you think will the consequences be? If there's one thing that really scares me is when I read the name Michael Skibbe, that just I get shudders. So but what do you think Dortmund will do? What are the options that are likely to happen in terms of coaching decisions right now if they feel like they have to sack Favre?
Well, unfortunately, in the last episode I said if Favre doesn't get 12 points out of the next 4 matches, he will not be the manager in the Rückrunde. I stick by that. And obviously he's not going to get the 12 points now out of the 4 matches. That's done. That's just not going to happen. I had also said Hertha is the trap game. Apparently Paderborn was the trap game because right now it's looking like Hertha may be the easier game, especially with Ante Czovic looking like he may be out. And I would be shocked personally if the next manager at Hertha is not Niko Kovac at this point. But as far as what the options are for Dortmund, he's got two matches to prove it. Because it's not fair, but it's what sports is. It's easier to replace the one manager versus 20 players. And that's the route you just go. As far as who can replace him, Michael Skibbe, the failures at Dortmund launched the failures at Dortmund launched his career. And who's next? Nevio Scala? Thomas Doll? All the shit that was there before Jürgen Klopp? Surely not. Can you get a Skibbe in to maybe not completely screw it up for a couple of weeks until the winter break? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, they might as well keep Favre, though.
Yeah, at that point, just keep him and come up with a solution. The good thing that we do have in Germany in the Bundesliga is we have a prolonged winter break, and that does give you a chance to do something at that point in time. It's not quite as bad a situation as it was 24 months ago, when obviously Bosch got sacked and Peter Stöger came in. I still have the wonderful dream that Pochettino shows up and Dortmund, but it's a pipe dream. I said it's very unrealistic. Last time, I think he's going to be in a big, big, big club, in terms of like a Real Madrid big or Manchester United big, versus Dortmund. But, hey, die Hoffnung stirbt zuletzt, as we say in German, hope dies last. So you never know. You never know. But it'll just be interesting to see how next summer plays out, because I don't think Favre is going to be around for a third season in Dortmund. I think that's pretty much done and dusted at this point. But Skibbe or Favre, the problem is with Lucien Favre, he may just not want to. He's showed that at Gladbach, he just walked away. And so he may just be like, screw it, I don't want to. And if he doesn't want to, what's the point at that point? And then you're stuck with, I'd almost rather have Terzic stand in there than Michael Skibbe, just because Michael Skibbe, that's trauma. That's past Dortmund, ghosts of Dortmund past trauma. And, we don't, any of us want to see that. Sivert.
Especially for Michael Zorc, because if you remember in these times, he was under high criticism. Really?
Of course, because he was still basically a rookie sporting director. He was still very young in his role and hadn't grown into it yet at that point. And you combine that with all the other crap that was going on at Dortmund behind the scenes. In a situation like that, you may even look at a name that Lars mentioned in Sivert. I don't think he's taken a job since he got the sack at Huddersfield. So I'd rather see him in there at this point, even if it's just at a caretaker level. But I absolutely agree with what you and Lars said, that, Watzke very clearly, publicly, which is unique. You don't usually get that kind of a public statement in terms of, dude, you got 2 matches to get this right or you're out. And it's not necessarily that the results have to be right. The performance has to be right too. And, the advantage you have with Barcelona is, even though it's Barcelona and they're really good, there too, things aren't great. And there's a lot of pressure building up on Ernesto Valverde there as well. So, and then you've got Chovic's situation with Hertha. So these are 2 matches that Dortmund could absolutely come out on top, play well, get great results and everything like that. But obviously, there's some pressure at Dortmund as well. Maybe I'd say a little bit less than it with Jovic and Valverde, but not far behind them. And so that could also gloriously implode.
All right, so before we delve into the Barca preview, which we've sort of already started last, can you quickly speculate about who could be a potential replacement for Lucien Favre? And since that is all fun, you can continue and talk about a potential winter signing for the striker position. If Dortmund pursue that, I'm not sure if they just say, okay, we screwed up, but we are not going to do anything about it until the summer. I'm not sure, but please be my guest.
Well, I was fairly convinced that if Favre was going to get the sack, Hans-Joachim Watzke would fulfill his not lifelong, but, half-decade-long dream of Hannes Wolf being the first team manager at Dortmund, because he absolutely loves the guy. But Hannes Wolf took up a job in Belgium for reasons entirely unbeknownst to me, outside of money, obviously. I think he's at KRC Genk. But, I'm not a huge follower of the Jupiler League in Belgium, so that might be wrong. Anyway.
Do you drink it, though?
No. So I was pretty certain that he was going to be the guy to get the job perhaps until the summer, and then let's reevaluate the situation. So that's out of the picture. So unless they get, the caretaker type in Skibbe or whomever, Sievert, at least he has the correct license. I mean, that's something you need to look at. You can't just appoint, let's say, Sebastian Kehl because he's close to the team, because, Kehl doesn't have the Fußballlehrer. I think in England, for example, would be the Elite A or Elite Europe or whatever license. So, that's something to consider. So unless it's a caretaker situation, I think the name that jumps out to me in terms of availability and potential fit at Dortmund, in terms of the football fans probably would like to see, even though, the guy is not particularly well liked in these parts and basically all of the Bundesliga, is Roger Schmidt, formerly of Paderborn, Salzburg and Leverkusen, and Beijing, I think, in China, where he was sacked in like August or September. So he is currently available for both talks and, ultimately a job. He has Bundesliga experience. He got Leverkusen into European competitions on a regular basis. He gave Dortmund some pretty decent fights, I would say, especially back in the Klopp days. I think in the final few seasons of Klopp against Leverkusen, those were always terrible to watch, but, highly intensive games. And obviously he has that Salzburg / Leipzig, in his past. So it's a playing style that is predicated on a lot of intense runs, high pressing, counterattacks, gegenpressing attacks. So, the kind of active, proactive, intense football that Dortmund just haven't played for quite some time now. So I think that's a fit that I can see as somewhat natural, even though I don't think this is necessarily a squad that, can play Leipzig football. But, if you add some of that intensity to Dortmund's high quality, I think that's something that could work. So I think he's my prediction for getting the job now, perhaps on like an 18-month contract. So nothing too outrageous. The second question was about the striker, right? I mean, the name on everybody's lips is Mario Mandzukic of Juventus, because, he's not in Juventus's plans anymore. And, obviously he's been mentioned about Dortmund, for a couple of years now. I think there is a legit, claim to be made that Matthias Sammer might push for him, because they know each other from Bayern days, and reportedly Sammer really, really likes him as a player and perhaps as a person as well. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on that part, because, I think Mandzukic is the kind of player you only like when he plays for your team, because he's kind of a dick, but, dicks on your team, that's something people can get behind. So, the problem with him might be wages. He's on a pretty high contract at Juventus after playing for a lot of big clubs in Europe and with Bayern and Atletico. So, he might be out of their range. And also he has been mentioned at Manchester United quite a bit over the last few weeks and months. So, I don't know if they could compete with that. So I think the other obvious name from outside the Bundesliga is Olivier Giroud. We basically know they wanted to sign him when Aubameyang left for Arsenal. He chose to stay in London back then and then moved to Chelsea, where he's basically just the Europa League striker at this point. I think he's not really playing any major role in the Premier League after Tammy Abraham exploded onto the scene really at the first team of Chelsea. So you would think that he's going to be available again. He has the Euros coming up. I mean, he still leads the line for France. And if he wants it to stay that way, it wouldn't hurt to, actually play meaningful games in the second half of the season. He's a really good fit for the rest of Dortmund's team because he's so great in the hold-up department of striking play. He offers a different element to Alcázar that, you wouldn't think that they'd stand on each other's feet, for, the 30 minutes when the second striker gets subbed in while chasing a game or whatever the exact situation is. So, if I had to predict two things, coach and striker, I would say Roger Schmidt and Olivier Giroud.
All right, interesting. Matthias, do you have such a prediction too?
I'll be honest, I totally forgot about Holger Schmidt. But last mentioning him, I'll be honest, I unfortunately completely agree that that's a very feasible alternative. You definitely get more pressing. And as far as Mandzukic or Giroud, I'd rather have Mandzukic. Because like I said, who doesn't like a dick in your team? That's a really bad quote for the episode, but, I think that's a very astute prediction that I will endorse Lars Pollmann's prediction for a new manager and striker for Borussia Dortmund.
Well, Hans-Joachim Watzke in a true Western and Westphalian fashion had to make a reference to telling the team basically to cheer up by quoting Martin Luther and saying a happy fart never comes from a miserable ass. So, which begs the question why they all play like ass clowns. But that's besides the point. So I appreciate some humor in here. And I think I also endorse the Lars Pollmann prediction of the year. So I guess we can move on now to the Champions League clash. Dortmund, I guess, needs a point or something to pretty much seal their qualification. Notwithstanding the very tough home game against Slavia Prague, but that is a must-win. But saying that and thinking about the Paderborn match, a must-win doesn't mean a win. So, anywho, a lot of people have waited for Dortmund to travel to the Camp Nou. Now that it's happening, I feel a bit underwhelmed because of the team Dortmund have and the coach and how not exciting it is as it might have been 4 or 5 years ago. But either way, here we are. Lars, is this a game you're personally looking forward to, or does it not excite you at all right now because of other circumstances?
To be honest, I hate late kickoffs now that I'm getting older. I mean, having to get up multiple times a week at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I don't necessarily...
There's a cheat code, though. You can just move to a different time zone.
Yeah, I guess I'll just have to find myself an American wife like you did. So I don't really appreciate, games lasting until like 11 p.m. And then obviously if it's Champions League, it's also full of, I'm not going to say anxiety, but, I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Like it's not like the final whistle, you brush your teeth and you're asleep after 10 minutes. Like the game lingers in your mind, even if it's like a boring goalless draw. I mean, it's still...
Some might actually call it excitement instead of anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the situation going into the game, I guess. But I mean, it's the Champions League. There are only so many games of this kind during a season, especially for, a club like Dortmund, for whom making it to like the quarterfinals has to be considered a massive success. So, if this game would take place on a Saturday afternoon, I'd probably be much more thrilled than I am now, but obviously also the situation of Dortmund and a little bit of Barca as well. I mean, this is certainly nothing compared to the perhaps greatest club side of all time under Pep Guardiola. There's certainly an element of, I think we talked about this for the preview of the first matchup with Barcelona, that there's an element of this game coming too late, as you mentioned before. Like we were robbed of the clash of ideas with Klopp and Pep at Dortmund and Barca, and now we are getting Favre and Valverde. I mean, I'm not necessarily the right guy to get hyped up for any game, but I think most people will find it hard unless they are traveling to Barcelona for the game themselves.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess the first name on the team sheet for Dortmund will be Achraf Hakimi, because I think he has scored 4 out of 5 goals for Dortmund in the Champions League, which is 80% of the contribution. So not great. But here we are. Dortmund are second behind Barcelona in Group F with 7 points, and third place Inter have 4 points. So a loss for Dortmund wouldn't be too terrible, but then Dortmund will have to hope that Barcelona also don't lose on the final match day at the San Siro. So obviously a point would be appreciated. Matthias, so which Dortmund side will we see? Because if I remember correctly, the first leg, if you will, was one of the better performances this season from Dortmund, warranted that Lionel Messi only came on after, I think, 60 minutes or so, or 70 minutes, and then didn't really change too many things because he came off a long injury and wasn't really in form. I presume this has changed now a tiny bit, so we will see an entirely different Barcelona outfit. Lars already mentioned who is fit, and obviously you can add Ousmane Dembele to that because he is fit now as well. So this Barcelona team will be an entirely different monster. So what do you expect?
Well, we can't forget, first of all, that Barcelona are playing with a makeshift defense. Piqué is suspended, and I think but their defense isn't necessarily their strength anyway. I'd probably say it's one of the greatest weaknesses of this Barcelona side.
Well, I know another where I would have said top-heavy team, but I remember Dortmund went without a shot on target over 3 halves against Munich and Paderborn, so I'll refrain from that comment.
Well, but it's different, I mean, you won't expect Barcelona to sit deep. They'll be on the front foot. Dortmund will probably be the deeper sitting side to cede possession to Barcelona, willingly or unwillingly. But I think in this case it'll be willingly. I do agree with Hakimi being the first name on the team sheet, not just because of his goal scoring prowess, but he's also a little bit more fresh. And you can't forget he is a Real Madrid player, and will probably be suitably motivated to take on Barcelona. And as such, I think that'll be the lessons learned from Paderborn and Munich, I think, will not be lost on Lucien Favre. And as such, I don't necessarily foresee another appearance of Mahmoud Dahoud or Weigl as a central defender. I think we'll probably see Witzel Weigl, and then hopefully Mario Götze. I think that would be exactly what this side needs.
Lars, I refer this to you while pointing out that I very much agree in the hope that I do also hope Weigl, Witzel start, and then you have Akanji and Hummels as center-back pairing. But Lars, do you think there is space for Mario Götze? Because I just read that Paco Alcácer will miss this game. He's all injured, so who should play up front? Would it be Royce? Would it be Götze? Would you play Julian Brandt as a number 10, or how would you set this up against Barcelona? Would you stick to the 4-2-3-1, or would you play a 4-3-3, 4-1-4-1? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you ask me, I mean, Götze would probably be my first name on the team sheet in most of these games, just because I think he's probably the most football intelligent player in Dortmund's side, outside of perhaps Mats Hummels, but he's a centre back. He's obviously playing, so I mean, it doesn't matter who's the first name on the team sheet. I think Götze would be among my regular starters, with Alcácer sprinkled in whenever he's healthy, which, is not often the case, unfortunately. So
great. Now I want soft serve because you named Sprinkles. Anyway, continue.
Obviously, Mario Götze would start in my 11 against Barca, but going by what Favre has done over the last few weeks and months, I feel like the most likely option will be Julian Brandt up front, which ends up with him not actually being up front, but rather him and Royce kind of taking up similar spaces, which is fine if they are playing in a 4-1-4-1, because there's still someone up front to play off of and make runs off, and someone to take out defenders by using evasive movements and whatnot, which is something Alcácer does so well and Götze can do well as well. But I think it's going to end up in a kind of alignment where there's no real presence up front, which has been a huge issue and is actually one of the main reasons why Achraf Hakimi can lead Dortmund in scoring this season, because they just didn't have anyone occupying the box, for example, for basically the entirety of that Slavia game. So his dashing runs were the only way Dortmund could score goals. And, it just so happens that he contributed in that major way. So I think anything other than 4-2-3-1 would be unlikely and perhaps even unwise. I mean, even if the 4-1-4-1 worked really well against Paderborn in the second half, I don't think we can necessarily equate Paderborn to Barcelona, even though Dortmund made them look like it for, some moments in the first half. So I think the smart money would be on Akanji coming back, Weigl moving into midfield, and unfortunately Brandt up front.
Well, yeah, so the semi-smart money, because that's Brandt up front just doesn't make any freaking sense to me. So can't do, but I think we can knock it on the head here, really, unless any one of you want to discuss the fullback positions and whether to play Guerrero or Nico Schulz, then please be my guest. I don't hear any enthusiasm, so I conclude no one wants to really talk about that. Does anyone want to point out anything about Barcelona, or is it pretty much clear how they play and who they are?
I think that's, for the most part, pretty much clear at this point under Valverde and the players that they have at their disposal. It'll be a little bit interesting to see how they form their backline, but that's not really going to be the biggest issue for Dortmund. Dortmund's biggest issue is going to be winning battles in central midfield and stopping Barcelona from getting high percentage chances at goal. I think if those issues are solved for Dortmund, then breaking down the makeshift defense for Barcelona is really of tertiary concern.
All right, Lars, then I will solicit a prediction now.
My prediction is I'm going to have fun watching Lionel Messi, which is basically a good way to spend Wednesday evenings. So I'm going with not too bad a Dortmund performance in a 2-0 defeat.
All right, Matthias.
Oh, jeez. Not 3-3, not 5-1. I think, God, it's technically the kind of match that Dortmund would really show up for. But I'm going to go for, unfortunately, also a Dortmund loss, in a probably entertaining 2-1 situation.
All right, so here's my prediction. I think that Dortmund will lose this game 4-1. I think they will be absolutely obliterated by Barcelona when Barcelona play some more possession football and suffocate Dortmund in their own penalty area. And we all know once Dortmund are sort of swimming and sitting deep, that they do not come up with the best defensive schemes. And I fear that them being suffocated for extended periods of time leads to goals and then to the eventual collapse that we have seen so often. So while I do harbor the hopes, as you do, Matthias, that this is a performance and a game where Dortmund show up, especially after that members assembly and that stern talking to and fans booing and everything, and the ultimatum for Favre and whatnot, I still think that this team can change this dramatically overnight, and when Barcelona play their way, that it's not going to be pretty for Dortmund, who are just very bad when put on the back foot. So 4-1 for Barca is my prediction. Anyway, so that concludes the Yellowwallpod episode for, I don't want to say this week because we still have to preview that Hertha game later on. But for now, I think we've talked enough about Borussia Dortmund, and I'm pretty sure there will be plenty of talking points coming out of next Barcelona game on Wednesday night, to the dread of last even 15 minutes later than a couple years ago. So a 9 p.m. kickoff in Germany, or I don't know what the time difference to Spain is. Anyway, thanks again, you two, for coming on. Lars, how can people get in touch with you / read your work?
Well, in order to read my work, they would need to speak German, which I'm not sure we can assume most listeners do. But, if you can speak German, you will find links to select few of my articles on my Twitter page, which is @LarsPollmann.
I will note that it will suffice if you can read German. So anyway, Matthias, how can get people in touch with you?
People get in touch with me via Twitter @MatthiasSug. And hopefully we're all three completely wrong about the Barcelona prediction.
Sure. You can find me @Stefan Butzko on Twitter. You can find The Yellowwall on Facebook and Twitter @Yellowwallpod. So Twitter handle to find our written content. Please go to theyellowwall.net, where you will find the various means to subscribe to our Patreon and pledge $1 a month to read all the written content, which is behind the yellow paywall. And obviously, please subscribe to our show in various ways, be it SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, etc. So, and of course, if you want to help us without pledging any money or sponsoring an episode, just go to iTunes, leave us a rating. That also helps to amplify the, visibility. So please do that. And if you want to, shoot us a comment or whatever, an email, please use yellowwallpod@gmail.com. That's where I see it the fastest. So anyway, as always, everyone out there, thank you all for listening. Goodbye.